I hope you are well. In this video, I'm going to go over how to gesso watercolor paper in our Stonehenge paper. So this video is for my painting students and also my color theory students as well. So I'm just going to talk just a little bit about paper. So in my painting classes, we are going to deal with acrylic paint. And acrylic paint is very versatile. You can paint on canvas, you can paint on paper, just about anything in my opinion with acrylics. But for my painting classes, I just want to have just a little quick tutorial on how to gesso your paper. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to tape down our paper. So what I have here is watercolor paper. And I got 300 pounds, and also I'm dealing with the Fluid 100. So it's 300 pounds. It's cold press. I have an 8x10 right now. Just it's small enough to fit. 300 pounds basically just means that it's a heavyweight paper. It's very thick. You can't really do anything with it because it's so thick. Even if I do this, you can see that it's not flimsy at all. So the first thing that we want to do with this paper, oh wait, before I get into that, I also want to talk about the Stonehenge. So Stonehenge paper, I know my Ryman students are going to get this, and you're going to get a heavyweight, and the heavyweight, it's a lot heavier than what I got right now because this is very flimsy, but it's all the same thing. So although I'm talking about watercolor paper, it's the same thing applies to the Stonehenge paper as well. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to tape down my lovely paper. So I have masking tape, which is basically frog's tape, and before I do this, I'm just going to get in a 1-inch border. So I like to have a 1-inch border. I always want my students to have a 1-inch border. So right now I'm just getting that in really fast using my graded ruler. So having a 1-inch border, you guys, just allows us to have some clean, crisp edges. So you want your edges to be clean. Another thing, it just helps with transporting. So when we take that tape off, we're not actually touching our painting. We're just touching the edges of the paper, and we can transfer it, move it around, and it just looks clean and neat and professional. So I have my little 1-inch border that's in. I need to make sure that I'm within the frame and it looks neat, hopefully. So I want to tape it down. So I'm going to tape it down. And you can use masking tape. I'm using frog's tape, which is a painter's tape. You can use any blue paint tape as well. I want to make sure that it's flushed to my paper. Probably don't need this much. So now it's flushed down. So the reason why I'm having you guys do this, because you can gesso the whole paper with white gesso, and I can get mine really fast for you. So I'm using this is the acrylic, artist acrylic white gesso from Winsor Newton. So I'm using gray gesso. So there's different types of gesso. There's clear gesso, there's gray gesso, which is a value 5 gray, there's black gesso, and there's white gesso. So I personally like for my students to start with a tone canvas or a tone paper before they start to paint. So when it comes to gesso, gesso is basically a barrier between the paper or the canvas and the actual paint, the acrylic paint that we're going to be using. So it's a surface that you want your paper to have. But for me, I want you guys to have a value 5 tone. So there's different types of vocab for it. So if you hear me say I want a primed gray paper, or if I'm saying I want a tone value 5 paper, or if I say an imprimatur gray, it's all the same thing. So it just means you need to hurry up and get rid of that white and start with a tone. The reason why we have to do that as artists is because it allows us to not have some optical illusion that tends to happen, or a simultaneous contrast that tends to happen when we start to mix our values. So normally if we mix our values, or we put a value down on white paper, let's say we put a value 7 or a value 9, which is really dark, it's going to look a lot darker on this white paper because of that simultaneous contrast. So if we come over with any type of tone, it'll allow us to gauge our mixes properly. So I'm going to let that be for another video, but that gives you a little bit of background of that. So what I did is because I could not find value 5 gesso anywhere in Dallas, that's where I'm staying, I'm probably going to have to order it. But what I did is I just mixed black gesso with the white gesso, and that gave me my value 5 gray. So what you need to have is you want to have a painter's brush that's here. You also want to, my painter's brush has a little bit of water on it, so it's going to thin out the gesso just a bit. So we're going to start applying the gesso. And then I want to come in and just try to just even it out just a bit. I don't too much like having too much brush strokes showing, so I just want to try to even it out if I can. Alright guys, so once it's everything is applied, you have to allow it to dry. So while it's drying, I'm just going to actually put it to the side for right now so it can dry, and then I'll talk about gessoing a canvas. So excuse my dirty board, but it's there. It's what it is. It's dirty. I'm an artist. So I have a small canvas panel that's here. So there's different types of canvas. You have a canvas board, which basically has either like a cardboard or some type of board that's with it. This is a canvas panel, and it has canvas wrapped around that cardboard. You also can use regular canvas. So this is a regular canvas that has stretcher bars. I don't know, there you go. So you can see the bars that's in it. That's this is a canvas on stretcher bars. So they're both the same thing. Normally these pre-made canvases already come with gesso on them, but most artists tend to re-gesso it and give it another layer, because they probably just come with one layer of gesso. Sometimes it has 2 layers. It really just depends on the quality of the canvas. So now that we have that, I want to come in. So the difference with the panel is you don't have to tape a 1-inch border to it. You don't need that. Even if you use the stretch one, you don't need it. something in my gesso. Alright, so I just want to just lightly brush, get some of those brush strokes smoothed out if I can. I don't want them too thick, because when you start to paint, you will see those thick brush strokes. Alright, guys. And yes, I just did that. Alright, so this is pretty much how you tone, prime, or imprimatura your canvas. Once again, it just means getting the white, knocking it out, and getting it down. So you can do your canvas panel, you can do a canvas with stretcher bars, or you can do watercolor paper or Stonehenge paper as well. So let's see if I'll check and see, it may or may not be dry. So as I'm looking at it, I think it's still drying. It's still drying. Another thing, you guys, as you can see, I'm still holding mines, but when you're done with applying the gesso, go ahead and rinse out your brush. You don't want this gesso to dry in your brush, because you can definitely damage it that way. Normally these house brushes are fairly cheap anyway, you can replace them easily, but you just want to make sure you just get that paint out as soon as you can. So that's something that's good to know. I'm trying to wait and see if it dries, but I don't want to take up too much more time. So you want to make sure that it's completely dry before you take the tape off. Alright. So now we have our gessoed toned gray value 5 on our watercolor paper, or once again you can do it on Stonehenge paper, as well as you can do it on a panel, a canvas panel, or you can do it on a regular canvas with stretcher bars. So you guys, I hope this helped. You want to make sure that this is always step one before we start any painting. You get your paper primed, your canvas tone. You want that value 5, unless I say otherwise. But this is how you gesso your paper, and your also your watercolor paper in your canvas, and your stretcher bar canvas. Another thing that I do want to discuss really fast before I move on to the next clip is I know for my color theory class, I had you guys start with just using acrylics and just getting a tone gray with the acrylic on your watercolor paper. There is a difference between that. So this is gesso, meaning that there's a sealed boundary between the paper and also your paint. Although when you tone a value 5 with your acrylic, you are setting some type of boundary, but it's not as solid as this. So there will be assignments where I'm like, you need to gesso it a value 5. That way when you start painting, you have that really good boundary in between. So I'll see you guys on the next clip.